Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
We've got an interesting topic today.
Yeah, I think so.
So what we're going to talk about is greed is good. Don't quit halfway.
Okay. Yes, I like it, Tanner.
Yeah. Now, we often think about greed in a negative light.
Yes.
But we're going to spin it for this podcast today.
Yes.
We're spinning it around.
Yeah.
Because we want you to be greedy. We want you to be greedy to heal and reach your goals. Now I want to clarify with this. We want people to be greedy, but not intense.
That's hard. Okay, because I feel like greed and intense, they go together. Like you're greedy, you want more. That's intense.
Yeah, it's a fine balance for sure. Because intensity is not going to be helpful. It's going to keep you in fight or flight.
Yes.
And that typically is going to worsen chronic pain, chronic symptoms. But we know life-changing healing is possible using this approach.
Yes.
That's why we're doing this podcast.
Yeah.
We completely believe in this. But what I often see happen to people is they don't dream big enough. They actually limit their progress by thinking this is good enough.
Okay, so you're meaning kind of get greedy, as in have big goals, believe things can get better, believe you can change.
Yes.
Okay.
And, it is going to take some consistent work. It's going to take some consistent work that's not always enjoyable.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part. We need to approach our pain, approach our symptoms, our emotions, our nervous system.
Yeah.
And overall, life in general. But that's a really difficult thing to do. And I think it's important to understand that this is going to be a bumpy road. I don't want to promote sunshine and rainbows here. There's some points where you can lean into enjoyable things, and I want that too. But it is going to take some consistent work to reach our goals.
Yeah.
But we want people to be greedy. And
one thing I think is important to note is often when people start this process, or people start meeting with us, say, they're just grasping hope. So the idea of getting greedy is I can't even get greedy because I don't believe it can happen.
Yes. And I'm going to share a bit about what I went through to kind of emulate this. Because with chronic pain and symptoms, especially if they've gone on for years, we end up in that dorsal vagal state.
Yeah. And remind people again what state that is.
So what I mean by this is we end up in this place of freeze, of shutting down, going numb, feeling hopeless, helpless, despair. Depression's really going to live here. And so I think what I see with people is they start to get hopeful about this approach, and maybe they can do a little bit more physically.
Yes.
And that's amazing. I want everyone to have that.
Yeah.
But what happens is, and I relate to this, we get to this attitude of maybe that's good enough. It's better than it was.
Yes.
And so, and the work is difficult, so people don't maybe follow through the whole way to see how much progress they could potentially make.
So it's getting a little bit of momentum and then stopping. And that's the greed that you're talking about. It's believe, no, it can be better. It can be bigger. You can do more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, at the end of this episode, Anne's gonna go through a little visualization meditation.
Yes.
That has some really useful questions in there that even if you don't do the visualization, jot these questions down because they're important ones to, start to visualize, start to brainstorm on, and making big goals for ourselves.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we need all the pressure and intensity to make it there on a certain time frame. Be cautious of that. We don't want to set a deadline here, but it's important to start to visualize this, to start to see maybe this is possible.
Yeah.
And so, for myself, at the end of my chronic pain journey, so this was well over 3 years in, I believe, I wasn't moving. I was clearly in that dorsal vagal place. Like you can attest to that. Like it was a very deep despair, hopeless, helpless, and shut down. Like just completely disconnected from the world, from Anne, from everything. And it was, some of the darkest moments of my life were in there. And so, it's like we said, it's so common that as a result of us not being able to like find a route through the medical system or to find hope with physios or chiropractors and nothing's getting better, it's very normal to get into this dorsal place. Now, luckily, I came to a mind-body approach. Kind of through my own research and reading. And I started to have hope that I could heal.
So again, back to hope being that starting place.
And I started to utilize all the things we talk about in this podcast. So if you're new to this podcast, we have a lot of episodes. Go back, listen to them. But eventually, all of a sudden, I was able to walk. I think it was like 30 minutes.
Which is huge. Because again, Tanner, like you're right. Like you were not walking. There was a points where Tanner was in a wheelchair and at some points was not walking at all. So this 30 minutes was huge.
It was a really big goal.
Yes.
And I worked hard on it for a couple of months. Very consistent exposure work, brain retraining. And I was able to tolerate working again.
Yes. Also a big change.
Yeah. And so at this time, I was feeling more regulated, but not super regulated. Like it was...
Okay, so what do you mean by more regulated but not super regulated? Like what was going on for you?
was spending less time in fight or flight, so I was anxious or having these like angry outbursts less. And I was definitely pulling my way out of that dorsal vagal place of kind of shut down. Despair. Like I was feeling less and less despair. But, I was more regulated. I was feeling a little calmer, a little more joyful at times. But it still wasn't great at this point. Like there was definitely a lot of fight, flight, freeze, shutdown still occurring.
Okay, so, and I think it's important to point out here, you're getting through, like you were physically moving again. Your pain was reducing, right? You're getting more regulated in terms of your emotions and nervous system. But you were still struggling kind of in that area of regulation. Because I think it's important to kind of note here again that link between nervous system regulation or emotional regulation and pain perpetuating.
Yes. And so things were on an upward trend. And I was incredibly grateful because compared to a couple months prior, it was already night and day. I was leaving the house. I could move around. I was working. I felt more regulated in my system. But my life was still very limited. Like if I thought of, the typical person out there that doesn't have chronic pain or symptoms, it was a very small world. It was just less small than it was.
Were you still living like someone with chronic pain and symptoms?
Yes, there was still, in last couple of episodes, we talked about the rule book. There was a lot of rules I was still following. Because I was nervous. And I remember at one point thinking like, maybe this is good enough. Like maybe I don't push the line anymore because I was doing a lot of this work, but there was a lot of fear of moving my body more.
Okay. What were you afraid of, Tanner?
I was worried of pain flares. I was really scared about that. And I think a lot of people feel this way. And when we're in that shut down, hopeless place of chronic pain and symptoms, when we start to even get to where I was, it can feel so much better. That I see people cut themselves short. And I almost did that too, because this work is hard, whether you're talking about exposure or brain retraining or emotions or nervous system regulation, trauma work. This is not all enjoyable stuff.
No.
And so there was a lot where I was like, maybe this is enough. Maybe I don't like keep pushing.
Did that small world or that just this is enough still keep you in a state of a bit of anxiety around your pain, around life?
There was just so many limits still, so many rules.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful that I didn't stop there.
What
And,
made you decide not to stop there? Like, what happened there?
so long ago, there was just a feeling inside of having that small bit of hope of like, I think it could even get better than this.
Mm,
And, at that point, like I wouldn't be able to do what I am doing now.
right.
Like we run a company,
Yeah.
we're starting another company,
Yeah.
we have kids. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to truly function the way that I am.
Actually, and that's true. Not that I want to pull out Tanner's ghosts and secrets here, but that's really true because I remember at points you weren't walking, you couldn't function, you weren't you mentioned we weren't connected emotionally, you didn't know how much you could take on or what kind of future you had.
Mhm.
So 100%, I want to echo that in terms of yes, that is really true. I think years ago, if we'd be like, this was going to be your life and all the parts of your life,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be able to believe that you could function in that life.
Yes. And I really want to give this message that we can be a bit greedy here. Not intense, but greedy of what you want your life to look like.
Yes.
And that's what I meant at the beginning of this episode, like greed in a good way.
Yeah.
That's what we're going for here. But I think that that's really essential to understand because you can likely, with consistent work and exploring different things, get to a much more regulated place in your nervous system where you're feeling safer, calmer, more connected, where you can tolerate being in fight or flight and not find it overwhelming, or tolerate being in a shutdown place and not find it overwhelming, or be able to approach emotions. Like all of this is very possible.
Yes.
But it's going to take practice. And even when it comes to moving your body, to doing activities, to all these things that make our life very full and vibrant, like that is possible when the pain or symptoms are neuroplastic in nature. And so really, I give this message of don't stop halfway.
Yeah.
A lot of people listening to this podcast, you're probably not new to the idea of neuroplastic pain or symptoms. Maybe some people are, so welcome if you're there. But a lot of people aren't. And it's a bumpy road. It's not a linear path. You're not just going to have your symptoms slowly decrease over time in this smooth way. Like it's going to be bumpy.
Yeah.
And we have to kind of endure some of that bumpiness as it slowly decreases and goes down.
Well, and I think as we've been highlighting it, it's also two pieces to focus on. So it's changing the relationship with the pain, exposure to the pain. But then we've talked a lot about nervous system regulation and emotions. And sometimes that's a piece that some people don't explore and they're just focusing on the relationship with the pain. But we know that there's that emotional kind of stress connection to pain. There's that nervous system connection to pain. So we know it's important to do exposure and work on both.
Yeah.
A relationship with emotions and nervous system, and then relationship with pain. Both of them, of learning kind of how to do work there and connect.
Yeah. And then, even in the course that we're developing, we really highlight that.
Yes.
We highlight focusing on multiple areas in your healing.
Yeah.
So that your world can widen in all areas. And so, like I said, be careful with greediness because we want people to get there, but you got to watch that intensity level.
Yes. And so you're right. Sometimes I see people with the good greed of my life can be big right off the bat.
Yeah.
But then they're jumping too far or they're pushing too hard. So it's have that goal, know you can get there, work towards that, but do the work along the way. Know it's a process. Know it's a journey. Yes.
And so the way we can do that, as I mentioned earlier, is do not set a healing deadline. Which
I think everyone wants to do.
Everyone wants to do. And I didn't do this. Yeah. I was really careful not to do that.
Are little goals okay? What about that trip I want to be maybe here or that?
Yeah, you just have to be cautious with it because it increases pressure. It increases that sympathetic fight or flight, anxious, fighting against the symptoms kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be an acceptance of where you're at today.
Yes.
And that you can't control the progress.
Mm.
But be greedy about where you want to get to in your healing.
Yeah.
So it's okay to have both, an acceptance of where you're at and where your progress is at today or this week, but still these big goals and dreams of what you want your healing to look like and what you want your life to look like.
And it's important to keep highlighting that then we need to keep doing the work to get there. We need to increase the exposure. Yeah. We need to increase kind of like moving towards widening the world up bigger. Yeah. So those steps need to keep going and rolling.
Mm-hmm. So what we've kind of created is a visualization.
Yeah.
But it's also a task people can leave with.
Yeah.
Because through this visualization that Anne's going to go through, we ask some really important questions.
Yes.
We ask some big questions.
Yes.
That people might be scared to ask about.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're going through it, make sure, we're watching our own system so that it's not becoming overwhelming.
Yeah.
But the goal here is to understand how we can get a little bit greedy about where we want to get to in our healing.
Mm-hmm. And maybe let people know, why is visualization so useful in healing mind-body concerns?
Yeah, so visualization is a really common one that's used as a brain retraining, because we're trying to give our brain, through visualization, new experiences of what life could be. What, your movement or activities could be, what your career could be, what your relationships, or even, your relationship with your emotions or your nervous system could be.
Yes.
Because when we're in that dorsal shutdown, hopeless, helpless state, everything we think about the future is a lot of times thinking, okay, my symptoms are permanent or they're going to get worse and my life's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And unfortunately, that fear for the future, that anticipation will start to increase symptoms.
Yes.
And so visualization is this brain retraining that we're doing, where we're helping the brain understand, hey, this is a possibility. So it's a very useful thing to kind of get into, and something that I used a lot when I was first recovering.
Yeah, for sure it is. And so I'll go through it right now. Even if you don't quite believe it and like you're letting yourself visualize this and ponder, that's okay. It's okay to kind of be like unsure about this, but give it a try. Let yourself lean into it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So go ahead, if you feel comfortable and safe, to close your eyes and lower your gaze. At first, we want you to slow down your breathing, inhaling and exhaling through your nose. So I'll take you through some breaths. We want you to practice making the exhale twice as long as the inhale. And so we'll do that now. Again, in through your nose, then out through your mouth. Go ahead and do 2 more of those. Imagine now, if you didn't have pain or symptoms, what movements, activities, or sports would you want to engage in? Notice how you feel in your body while doing this. Allow yourself to visualize, what would a day in your life look like if you were more regulated in your nervous system, meaning you spend less time in fight, flight, freeze, or shutdown. Really break down how things could be different in your day. Notice what sensations begin to occur in your body. Now, imagine how would your relationships with your family and friends look different if you were pain or symptom free. Again, noticing any pain or symptoms that might shift in your body. What would it mean for your life if you were able to approach your emotions with ease and a sense of safety? Make sure to notice what emotions arise as you do this. Lastly, visualize what would your career path look differently if you were pain or symptom free. Again, notice how you are feeling in your nervous system as you visualize this. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and now return to the room. Were you doing this, Tanner?
I was doing it too.
How was it for you?
It's nice. It's
what
relaxing.
was nice about it? What did this do for you, Tanner?
I think it's just such a great exercise. And every once in a while I do it even when I don't have pain or symptoms very much anymore.
Yeah.
Because I think it's useful. I think it's useful to really place yourself in these different settings of what your life could look like, right? And so, this is our episode on greed is good.
Well, and if it just starts with like visualizing and allowing yourself to kind of lean into how your life could look bigger, what that greed could look like for you in terms of having kind of bigger hopes and goals, that's a really good starting place. And then it's kind of pushing to keep doing the work to move towards them.
Yes. I think it can motivate people to consistently engage the work. Because as we said, it's hard work. And, we need that motivation to keep working away. Again, don't be intense if you're listening to this. But consistently engaging in the work is very important. Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thanks for listening.
And we will talk to you all next week.
Talk to you next week.